Welcome back to the Mental Space with Sean Garvey right here on News and Talk 1380 WAOK, also on your Odyssey app. Just search for News and Talk 1380 WAOK. We are also streaming on the Flow Television Network, so you make sure you check us out on your TV screen, your smart TV, as well as on the radio. Sean Garvey in the studio. The holiday season is back once again, and there are people out there that are dealing with what is called holiday grief. Listen, we've all been there. We've all been through some form of holiday grief, especially celebrating the Christmas season by ourselves, alone. And joining with us right here on the Mental Space with Sean Garvey, I have an expert, a therapist, a speaker, motivational speaker, author, and an income strategist. Of course, that's a conversation for a different day. And she is also the author of her latest book, The Gift of Grief, a practical guide on navigating grief and loss. On the Mental Space with Sean Garvey, we have Dr. Ajeta Robinson. Dr. Robinson, welcome to the Mental Space.
Thank you.
How is your mental health, first and foremost?
My mental health is really well. I practice radical self-care. It's a non-negotiable.
Radical self-care, what does that look like?
It looks like I start and end my day with me. Oftentimes we start our day in service to others, and if we get to ourselves as an afterthought, it's after we're depleted. And so radical self-care means that I start my day serving myself so that I have reserved the energy to serve others.
I like that. You don't hear radical self-care. You just hear self-care, but you don't hear radical self-care. So you take it to the next level.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think about it as, if a friend calls you and they ask you, oh, are you available to do X, Y, and Z? It's not on your schedule. We often will cancel what we have prioritized for ourselves to make ourselves available to help someone else. And so radical self-care means that it has to be a non-negotiable. Okay. So that means that I can show up and serve as a therapist, as a friend, as a mom, from my overflow, because I'm not depleted. I'm not dipping into my reserves.
All those different areas.
All those different areas.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Mother of two amazing children and a fur baby. For those that know, talking about an animal, a fur baby. But you come from a very humble background yourself. And those parts, those areas in your life propelled you to be in the position that you are in right now. Talk to us about your backstory.
Absolutely. So I like to say that I became who I needed. So I'm a first generation poverty and trauma disruptor. So I'm the first in my family to go to college. Okay. I'm the only doctor in any generation, right? And so the first to do a lot of things, right? I had a parent incarcerated until I was 8. Addiction, have a brother serving a federal sentence. So all of the odds stacked against me, right? I grew up in one of the worst neighborhoods in St. Louis. You didn't want to be in my neighborhood after the streetlights went out, right? So most of my friends didn't live past high school. So the fact that I went to college, got a doctorate, I recognized that I had experienced a significant amount of trauma, but it was my norm. So in order to be able to get to a place where I could create a different path for myself, I had to unpack the things that I had experienced that actually weren't normal, right? They were just a part of my day-to-day. Right. And so a big part of what I do today is really reaching back and serving folks who are like me, that are the first to do it, right? Because there's also loss in being the first, right? So I have a way more student loan debt that I probably would have had if someone had gone before me and knew how to navigate that terrain, right? A little differently. And so there's a lot there that I get to kind of bring full circle today.
Okay, let's take a break. I want to talk about holiday grief. Tonight's topic, holiday grief is real. People are going through it, facing it. What does holiday grief look like? So let's unpack all that and more. Once again, if you're just tuning in to the Mental Space with Sean Garvey, we are talking to motivational speaker, author, and therapist, Dr. Ajeta Robinson. We have her in the studio with Sean Garvey. It is the Mental Space right here on News and Talk 1380 WAOK. We will be right back. Welcome back to the Mental Space with Sean Garvey right here on News Talk 1380 WAOK, also on the Flow Television Network and on ReachOneNetwork.tv. Sean Garvey, holiday season is here. We are talking about holiday grief. Holiday grief is real. It's not made up. It's not fake. It is real. We have people dealing with it and joining with us to talk about it and to unpack everything related to holiday grief. We have motivational speaker, also of the latest book, The Gift of Grief. We're going to talk about that in just a few moments. And licensed therapist, Dr. Ajetta Robinson, joining with us to talk about holiday grief. Holiday grief, what does that look like? To me, it looks like different layers, right? It looks like someone grieving over a heartbreak, someone grieving over the loss of a loved one, someone grieving that they're not going to be able to go out and get any presents for their loved ones, their family members, their kids during the holiday season. Is it all of the above, or is there one particular holiday grief that hits people the most?
I think it's all of those, right? And more. One of the things that we've been noticing that's been coming up more recently is the loss of tradition. Especially as, even thinking about my own family. My grandmother is still alive, but she has dementia. So we can't get that recipe that seems to involve, I think it's her finger that perfects that recipe, right? It's her, that magic. And so we've had to figure out, what does Christmas look like if we can't go to Big Ma's house, right? Because it may be that they haven't died, but the circumstances have changed, right?
Yeah.
It may be that we don't have a family. The peaks in divorces, families uncoupling, is triggering grief around the holidays.
Yeah, we can't forget that.
Absolutely. It's a big one. So it's a non-death related loss that gets exacerbated because now, families are split maybe between two homes. The kids are shuffling back and forth, right? The way they may do things at mom's house is different at dad's.
Yeah.
There's so much involved there, right? We're grieving all of that.
Yeah. Is it really hard to navigate grieving during the holiday season? I mean, especially when there's so much going on in the world today. Is it really that challenging to navigate it?
Yeah, so the holidays exacerbate the grief that already exists, right? And so we think about, it just makes for many that wound a little bit deeper, right? It peels the scab off of something that we maybe thought was a healed wound.
Yeah.
And so I think what happens is anniversaries like holidays and these life milestone events really just re-trigger grieving that's already present, right? It just makes it a little bit more acute.
Right. Especially when you're dealing with traffic, right? I'm in Atlanta. And during the holiday season, traffic can be bananas. It can be cray-cray, right? So sometimes I find myself grieving over the fact that we got so many people in Atlanta during the holiday season. And I get it. We have people from out of town that come down here and visit family members and friends and stuff. But being in that traffic jam for 2 hours, even sometimes 3 hours, I can grieve over that. I can definitely.
Yeah, and that's a symbolic loss that I think we sometimes miss because nobody died, right? And really, it is the loss of routine.
Yeah.
We saw this peak during COVID, right? The loss of routine, loss of identity, loss of structure, which really for many of us translates into a loss of safety. We don't know. We like things that are predictable. We like the structure of things. And so we grieve when those things change. And traffic, holiday seasons, they change our pattern, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, because when people think of holiday grief, they only think about either two things: being alone, right, during the holiday season. You spoke about divorce, people getting a divorce, people breaking up and having to spend time alone by themselves, right? Either that or the loss of a loved one during the holiday season. In my past episodes of The Mental Space, I brought in families of the deceased and imagining, as a personality and as someone who comes from a huge support system, imagining how I would feel if I lose somebody during the holiday season. True story, I lost my grandfather. I call him Pops. I lost him in December of 2013. December 2013. So we're talking about 10 years ago. Yeah. And I'm still dealing with it because I cannot call my grandfather anymore during the holiday season and wish him Merry Christmas,
Yes.
or, Happy Kwanzaa. You know what I mean? And I remember he would, every time during the holiday season roll around, he would send me a Christmas card with money inside. Yeah, I was one of those people that took the card out and got the money before I could read anything on the card. You all know you all do that, but still dealing with it to this very day, 10 years later, it's still, it's still not trigger me, but it still put me in a place of grieving over the fact that we have not spent more time together during the holiday season.
Absolutely. And I think something that you're really bringing up is that a big myth on this healing journey is that we are fooled in thinking, or even socialized in thinking, that it just takes time. But time alone does not do the healing work of grief. Time does not, make it any easier. What often happens is that as time progresses, we develop the muscle, the skill set to adjust to the weight of loss. And so what you're talking about is grieving a loss that's never going away. Your ability to hold it is different, right?
Yeah. And you know what else hits me hard too over the last few holiday seasons, Christmas, is my breakup. And I've been very candid about my breakup in 2020. And coming to the realization, the reality that over the past few years, I haven't been able to spend Christmas with the person that I was in a serious relationship with. So now you back into that mindset, Dr. Robinson. You back into that mindset of getting acclimated and adapted to being alone during the holiday season. And you used to being with somebody during the holiday season. Absolutely. So I know that got to be hard to navigate as well too at times, right?
Absolutely. We all desire that companionship, but there's something about being with someone that knows you, right? That constantly having to kind of get to know people again, reintroduce yourself. And then the grief that shows up when that life plan changes, right? For many of us that have been in long-term relationships, we didn't envision being, dating again, right? And it's not exactly exciting out here is what I'm told, right? And so we are grieving the loss of the known, even if, because we had plans, right? Those plans are no more.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Dr. Ajetta Robinson in the studio, we're talking about holiday grief is real. Holiday grief is real in time of the holiday season. Support system, being around your family, and knowing what that holiday season looks like when it's different from any other holiday season one experience, right? And so how top support those grieving around you. Let's talk about that. People that are grieving around you, the support, what does that look like in detail?
Yeah, so I always teach people an acronym. It's called ACT, A-C-T. So A is acknowledge the grief. Sometimes we avoid just saying, I'm really sorry that your grandfather died, right? We avoid using the words because I don't want to trigger you. But the reality is the person that's grieving, they've never forgotten the loss. So you acknowledging it can be really affirming. People report feeling seen, heard, and cared for when their loved ones just acknowledge that they're grieving, right? Especially when it's a non-death related loss, because we often don't know what to do, right? So that's the A, acknowledge the loss. The C is to be a compassionate companion. This means not being judgmental, not pushing people if they're not ready, right? That includes if they're not ready to talk. Because sometimes we just want people to be present with us. We're not ready to do anything, right? We don't have to be active in our grief all the time. And then the T is talk or tool. Sometimes we actually just need to tell the story over again. It may be that last conversation we had with our grandfather. It may be the last, just retelling the story of that breakup, right? Because we're trying to make meaning of either what happened or what is no more, right? That includes, connecting people to therapy, right? The really interesting piece about being a companion, I like to think about if you were to, how when we have those Olympic athletes that may have visibility challenges, they have someone that they connect to their arm and their leg. Well, the reason that they don't fall is the guide, the companion, matches the pace of the person they're supporting.
Okay.
And we want to take the same approach when it comes to grief. We want to match the pace of the person who's grieving, right? And to be present, allow them to lead, and allow them to change their mind.
Yeah.
Right? Absolutely.
Absolutely. Dr. Jetta Robinson, can you stick around for just a little bit? I want to talk about how to recognize signs of grief in yourself and in others. I want to talk about you too. Like, how were you able to recognize the signs for yourself? Not just as a therapist, but as a mother, as a pillar in the community. How did you recognize that and provide advice to our listeners and our viewers there? Once again, we are joined by licensed therapist, author of the latest book, The Gift of Grief, a stocking stuffer. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to tell you why that is a stocking stuffer in just a little bit. Dr. Jetta Robinson, Holiday Grief is Real. We got more on the way next. Sean Garvey, The Mental Space. You can see the sign at the bottom here of your screen there, The Mental Space with Sean Garvey, right here on News and Talk 1380 WAOK. One more segment.
You can send more holiday joy from the comfort of home. The United States Postal Service, delivering for America. Ship from home at USPS.com/holiday joy.
While we're waiting, we're going to go to a break here. Welcome back to the Mental Space with Sean Garvey right here on News and Talk 1380 WAOK. Make sure you follow 1380 WAOK on social media, 1380 WAOK on Instagram, and the voice of the community, News and Talk 1380 WAOK on Facebook. And of course, you can follow me at Sean Garvey ATL on all your social media, including Instagram and the Mental Space Live on IG and on Facebook. And once again, we are joined by Dr. Ejetta Robinson, motivational speaker and licensed therapist. We're talking about holiday grief is real, right? And so I asked you before the break, recognizing the signs of grief in yourself and others. Let's talk about you for a moment. How do you recognize the signs of grief within yourself, especially with all that you went through in the past?
Absolutely. So I am an internalizer, right?
Mhm.
And so I feel everything in my body. And so one of the places that alerts me that I'm probably not okay is my stomach gets to rumbling. It
Mhm.
feels like there's doing flip flops. And so
Yeah.
that's often a place where a good indicator that I'm probably not okay. And then I often will get migraines. And so those are physical signs when I'm grieving, right?
Okay.
Well before I register, like, it's an anniversary, right?
Right.
It kind of creeps up on me, but it shows up in my body first.
Okay. So what do you say to people? How can one or many others recognize signs of grief?
Mm-hmm. So I always say that the body keeps the score. That is paying attention to the changes in your body. Oftentimes it shows up as physical aches and pains. It may show up as sadness, depression, sometimes chest, right? Chest tightening and palpitations.
Yeah.
It often shows up, especially for those of us that are fairly highly productive, as an inability to concentrate, inability to sleep, as well as a loss of memory, right? So if we kind of have some gaps in those things, we probably want to touch base with a professional.
I remember you spoke about, just to circle back, I'm glad you said that, loss of memory, and you spoke of your mother,
My grandmother.
your grandmother facing dementia, and then of course my grandmother faced dementia at one point in her life before she transitioned, and just the inevitable happening for a person, because we all know that there's going to be a point in our lives as adults, Dr. Robinson, that a mother, a father, or any parent or any family member is not going to live forever, right? So to your younger clients, right, that are dealing with a mother or a grandmother that are facing dementia, or even a father or grandfather facing the same thing, what do you tell your clients, and what can you tell our listeners that are dealing with that, especially our caregivers? What do you say to that?
Again, radical self-care. None of the other pieces matter. You're not going to be, effective with caring for your loved one if you're not okay, right? So put your mask on first. But the other piece is be present. We're on borrowed time, especially when we have a loved one that's navigating dementia or that's at a later stage in life. And so be present. Time is a gift that's unopened by many. And so how do we live today? There's nothing that orients us to living a more intentional life than the reality of death, right? And so be in community, take care of yourself, and be present.
Yeah. Let's talk about how to plan for the future from a healed, quote unquote, I'm using air quotes here, healed and mentally healthy lens. I don't think anybody, I mean, to be honest with you, Dr. Robinson, I don't think anybody is planned for the inevitable, or they don't put themselves in a position to plan for the inevitable or to plan what the future looks like. But how can one start planning though for the future, especially from a healed, whether it's an unhealed relationship or just going through that healing process? How can one plan for that?
I think it goes back to our values, right? It goes back to who do we desire to be? Who do you want people to say you are when you're not in the room, and then be that, right? What do you want to have done in your life if today was your last day? If tomorrow is all that you have, what would you like? How would you like to show up and be that person, right? And that's especially true in relationships, is to be who we desire to attract.
Yeah, what you put out there is what you will attract, of course, in relationships, right? What are some tips you can give to people being alone, being isolated during the holidays, or not having enough members in the family to be around them during the holiday season? What are some tips you can give to our listeners, even to myself? And the reason why I asked that question before you give us your answer, I posted a message on Facebook recently, and I said that I was taking a break from social media, taking a break at least 1 week from social media, dealing with isolation and depression, especially since the pandemic, right? And I needed to take a break from social media and just take a break from all the distractions that social media users like myself tend to see on a day-to-day basis, right? And also still dealing with the loss of loved ones, and my relationship ended in 2020, still dealing with that, and certain things that I see on social media that remind me of things from the past or things from 2020. You know how Facebook does, you all know, it brings back those memories that you see from 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So that was something that I was in a vulnerable state of expressing on social media a few days ago. But what are some tips you can give to me and to our viewers and listeners?
Yeah. So I think boundaries are important. Boundaries are big, right? And so boundaries with respect to how you're using your time, who has access to you. I think far too many people, especially with social media, have access to us that don't add positively to our quality of life. I also think that if we could stop shoulding on ourselves, and that is telling the things that we tell ourselves we should do, but that don't actually align with what we desire to do or what's good for us to do. And so really kind of changing expectations about how we're supposed to show up. And when it comes to navigating the holidays, give yourself permission to change your mind, right? And so I know that I drive myself to holiday events because when I'm ready to go, I can go, right? If I decide that I need to, take a step back and I need some alone time, I have the flexibility to do that. And I'm not going to beat myself up about it. So I think just be kinder to yourselves and then be in community with people who care about how you're feeling.
And even watching a feel-good movie, a feel-good holiday movie, there's tons and tons of holiday movies coming out. So watching some of that, taking a break from social media, like I just mentioned, some good things as well. And also picking up this book right here, The Gift of Grief. Talk to us a little bit before we let you go, Dr. Robinson. Talk to us a little bit about the book. What can people expect from reading this book? Something to read during the holiday season.
Absolutely. So there's a chapter specifically about grief and the holiday to help you navigate that. It has a ton of things that you can do to help yourself and to help a loved one. But also, the book will help you name some of the things that you may not be recognizing as grief and then help you with a path forward, right? So there's a lot of information. It also comes with some video companions, exercises, things of that nature. One of the things that's been really helpful is it talks about grief and social media specifically and how you can navigate and you can turn some of those settings off of those platforms so that isn't re-triggering. You can turn those memory reminders off on Facebook and some of these other platforms to help you take care of yourself.
What page is that on?
The social media. The social media, I think it's chapter 8.
It's chapter 8. But I'm definitely going to read the entire book, and I encourage everyone to read the entire book as well because there's just so many layers, so many different things that you break down in this book. The Gift of Grief, and it's a great gift during the holiday season. Ding ding, right here. All right, so thank you so much, Dr. Jenna Robinson. Before you go, let the people know how they can get in contact with you, where can they follow you, and the website for more information about your services.
Absolutely. So ajenarobinson.com is my website, my book, my therapy practice, everything is listed there. And I'm Dr. Ajena Robinson on all platforms.
Dr. Ajena Robinson, over 15 years of experience working in the mental health field, an author, a motivational speaker, and an income strategist. We got to bring you back into the studio, and we got to talk about income and mental health. Yes. In the new year, 2024. So 3 things for me to take away: acknowledging, compassion, talk, or 2, act. To help you get over about that. So 3 things for me to take away: acknowledging, compassion, talk, or 2, act. To help you get over the grief, to help you get over something that you're dealing with during the holiday season. I love it. Dr. Jetta Robinson, thank you so much for coming on the mental space. You have definitely been a blessing. Thank you so much, and continue to do the great work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. All right, y'all. It's the mental space with Sean Garvey, right here on News and Talk 1380 WAOK. Also on ReachOneNetwork.tv and on the Flow Television Network.